again. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Real Estate for Real People. I'm allowed to say it, we're really excited.
You stole my tagline.
I know, I couldn't help it. You got me excited. We're really excited for our guest today. It's going to be really interesting, and I'm sure the time will fly. So we have Stuart Yano joining us today with GeoUtility. And we're going to talk about solar. It's not just solar that you guys do. It's geothermal and solar.
That's right.
But installing solar systems on houses is something that I know, we just did it on our house. You guys helped us. And we have lots of people asking questions. So
yeah. So before we maybe jump into that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about you and your background and how you sort of got into this.
Yeah, sounds good, Shannon. Yeah, so I'm a mechanical engineer. I went to UBC and graduated a long time ago. And I've been doing building systems for homes for about 20 plus years, focusing mainly on geothermal for the last 20.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in the last 5 years or so, started getting into solar or PV. Sometimes it's referred to as PV, which is photovoltaics. Just doing rooftop solar. And and our company branched out. We had all the trades in place to do the installation. So we decided to kind of partner the two together. Geothermal and solar go really well together, although we do often install just solar or just geo, but paired together, they work really well.
Wow. I love it.
And so, I guess we might as well dive right into it. But if somebody comes to you like you did, Tamara, and said, okay, we're just wanting, looking at solar, what do you tell people? And does it matter? Certain houses work for solar, certain houses don't,
Yeah, it does. The house does make a difference. It depends on the type of roof you have. So in Tamara's situation, you had a flat roof. It was actually fairly easy to do solar on a flat roof. I just did a renovation or really a new build on our place, and we put solar as well on a flat roof. On pitched roofs, it depends on the type of roofing you have. So if you have cedar shingles versus asphalt shingles or different types of materials, clay tiles become a little bit more challenging to get solar on. But generally you can do solar on most homes. The key things you want are you need good exposure. You need south-facing exposure or west-facing exposure. Where we are, the south, the sun comes up in the east, goes across the south, and then across to the west. And you really need to get that good southern exposure.
That was the question I had, because I know some people with a true north-facing house, it's not going to work, or certainly it wouldn't be worth the money.
No, it's probably not really worth it unless you just really wanted to do it. But what happens is you get less sun, you produce electricity, and your payback will extend a lot longer. So shading is another factor.
Right.
And in my house, there are a couple big trees that from I think around 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they do shade the sun, or they shade the panels themselves.
Right.
And you could see it. We have an app that allows us to track our usage, and you could see the production drop instantly. So if you're in a fully wooded area, it's going to be tough because you're not going to generate nearly as much power. If you're completely exposed on the roof of a high building like we're in today, you'd have great production all day long. You'd maximize your output.
So I have a question then, and this might be a dumb question, but can you put solar panels not on a roof? Like if somebody says, yeah, my house really doesn't, but I've got a big property and, I can put them over on this part of the land. Can you do that? Or
yeah, you certainly can do it. Those are called ground mount solar systems. And you see ground mount systems mainly in large utility scale installations. So if you ever fly over the Southwest to Phoenix or California, you see these massive solar farms that are kind of megawatt producers of power. Those are all ground mount systems. You can do them, but in a residential application, we generally don't do it, only from a cost perspective. It does add a lot more cost per watt, which is kind of the metric that we use. The costs go up, and it's just a bit more of a challenge, but it's completely doable. The technology's there, and the racking systems are available. But most of the solar we do, we look for that low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rooftop solar is really the generally what we do.
It's out of the way as well. I'm thinking of our property, for example. If we put it down on the ground somewhere, well, then that's an area.
Well, then you'd be worrying about maintaining it and, getting wrecked or getting vandalized. Or, there's so many different other factors then, but
it is a solution that's out there, and we've looked at it for some customers, but we found that it just became cost prohibitive, and we didn't move forward with it. So rooftop is generally what we do.
Now, and how long does it take? And Tamara, I guess you'd be able to speak on this too. But really when you put, even like Tamara's, for example, when you put the solar in, how long does it take till that's paid off, until it makes sense, I guess, from a cost
Yeah, I mean,
perspective?
that's the number one question we get asked
Yeah,
is, when am I going to
exactly.
see my money back?
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, the first thing I point out is it's the only thing on your home that actually is an investment, right? You get a return on that
Right.
investment, that it produces power, which has a value to it. But the payback is about a 10-year payback. It really depends on my home, for instance. I have a bit of shading, so I probably get maybe 10, 15% less productivity than you do. So it
Right.
probably like a couple years longer for me.
Right.
If your installation costs are really easy, inexpensive, let's say an asphalt roof is usually the easiest to put on, which happens to be most of the roofs in the Okanagan.
Yeah.
Your payback is going to be a little less. And utility rates are constantly changing. Electricity rates, as we know, are
Right.
changing all the time, but about a 10-year payback.
Okay.
If you look at you look at an IRR, or return on investment, it's about a 6% return on investment,
Yeah.
which is
Wow.
pretty good.
That is pretty good.
Like I said, name one other thing in your home that gives you a 6% return.
That's it. There's
There isn't
nothing.
one, really.
Well, and I think it's growing in popularity. If you'd asked me even 3 years ago, 4 years ago, if it was worth spending the money to put solar on your house, when you went to sell it a year later, would you get the money back? And I don't know that you would have. Today, I think you would. I think people are looking for, alternative energy sources. We're very affordable. Electricity in BC, in Canada, compared to Europe, compared to other places in the world, is relatively affordable. But my Fortis bill is still sky high. So it's coming down, and
absolutely.
it will come down. I know with in time as our solar. Like, we've only had solar now for 3 months. It's kicked in. So
Yeah, there's definitely a growing interest in the technology. We're a bit behind the times, to be honest. In Canada, the federal government hasn't had any incentives in place until just recently. They have the Canada Greener
Yes.
Homes programs, which provides about up to a $5,000 incentive, depending on the size of your system. Prior to that, there were no incentives for solar. Whereas you
Wow.
go to the US and there are incentives all over the place. I was mentioning before to Tamara
Yeah.
that the state of California requires all new homes to have solar on them. Every single new home has solar.
must.
Wow.
Must have solar.
Yeah.
Yeah, a certain like a 2 to 3 kilowatt system, which is a fairly small system, but still
It's something.
it's something. And so in Canada, we're really late to the game in adopting solar, but now we're seeing a lot of popularity, an increase in popularity for sure.
Yeah.
And what's your forecast? I'm sure you guys, as your company sits down and looks at that and says, okay, where do we see, this in 5 years, 10 years? Where do you see solar, and how many people do you find or think will be using it here?
Yeah, I think it's just going to increase. I think over time, eventually, every home will have solar. It won't be long. I don't know how long, but I suspect within 5 to 10 years, it'll probably be building code. You have to put solar if it's possible.
Especially
So-
here. I mean, we have so many hours of sun. It
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense.
we're in a good market for sun. One of the advantages of solar in our market is something called net metering. So how net metering works is Fortis, we're in the Fortis territory right here in Kelowna, but if you're in the North Okanagan or if you're in Lower Mainland with BC Hydro, they also have net metering. And what they do is they reconcile your energy use, so how much you use to run your lights and keep the lights on,
Yeah.
versus how much electricity you produce on an annual calendar basis. So in the Okanagan, it's bright and sunny all summer long, but we know it's a little bit gray and gloomy in the winter. That doesn't really matter because you're producing electricity in the summer, and it reconciles over that 12-month period. So in the summer, on a lot of installations, we'll actually be producing more than you're using. So that power
even
goes
right
back
now.
to the grid.
Oh, so it kind of banks it in a
So
sense.
it goes back to the grid. Your meter essentially spins in reverse, and you account for how much you use versus how much you've generated.
Got you. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
that's the law here in British Columbia. You have the regulators say you have to use net metering. So
I love it. Well, even I'm just looking right now, Shannon, I can show you. And the listeners can't tell, but people who are watching this will be able to see. But just looking at the power we're generating right now, it's October 10th, 11th, and 4,316 watts. So at 2
that's quite a
o'clock
bit.
in the...
4.4 kilowatts. That's a lot of power. That's a lot of electricity.
That's amazing.
And we
it's
didn't
so
do
neat you
that
have it
many
right on your app.
panels.
I would think I'd be addicted to that. I'd be
It's
checking it all the
fascinating
time.
because we can actually go on and look. I love it because we can look and see how much we're generating today, how much this week, how much since the system turned on.
And you could look at each panel. It shows you instantaneously how much each panel's producing, and it helps
Yes.
troubleshoot because every now and then, if you have an issue,
Right.
it helps you troubleshoot the system. So that's very common. All of the solar systems that we do have that app connectivity, and it's
Wow.
most people like to geek out and check out.
It
what
just
they're-
it
what they're
feels pretty high
producing.
tech. It's good. Now, a big question when people find out we've got solar, because our house has a flat roof, you can really see the solar panels, and all the neighbors were curious. Lots of people are asking about it. Number one question people say is, okay, so do you store the power? Like, are you off the grid now? And we're not. So let's talk
Yeah,
about
I get
that.
asked that question a lot too, whether batteries make sense. And I usually recommend people don't use batteries in British Columbia. In fact, we have yet to install a battery system. And the main reason, there's two reasons why you would install batteries. One is for blackouts. So if
Right.
you had batteries, it would allow you to have power during blackouts. We have very low blackout. This isn't, again, California, not to use them as a bad example, but we don't get blackouts very often.
No.
So I'm not fearful of running out of power. It just doesn't happen very much here. And the second is for what's called time of use electricity rates. So in other regions, namely in the States, you have different electricity rates during the day compared to at night. And that's because they have such high intensity, electrical demand intensity during the day that they charge you almost twice as much for electricity that's used during the day as opposed to at night. So what the battery systems do, like the Tesla Powerwall, that's the most common example people refer. The batteries allow you to, you can store your energy during the day and buy power off the grid at night. So it allows you, through the brains and the kind of the AI built into the battery, allows you to buy power when it's cheaper.
Right.
We don't have time of use utility rates in British Columbia. I'm not sure. I don't believe other provinces do, but so I think across Canada it's pretty universal where we don't have the time of use rates.
Interesting.
So having batteries in BC really doesn't provide you any advantage except for during power failures.
Right.
Right.
So, and they're quite costly. Or the other option is, the other situation would be off-grid systems. So all of
Right.
all of the PV systems that we do are called grid tie systems. We're tied into the electrical grid. If you have a cabin in the woods and you want solar, you want PV, you need to have batteries. If you don't have electricity at your home, then that's a
Right.
different story. You need batteries for storage. There's just no way around it. But if you're grid tied in the city or connected to any of our electrical grids, then I usually recommend against batteries, or you don't need to have batteries.
Now, hard question to answer, but if, I'm sure some of our audience is wondering what's the cost. So an average system, are you able to state
Yeah,
that?
for sure. So costs have kind of gone up and down a little bit. I think we've reached kind of the bottom of what pricing is. So if you look at solar 10 years ago, it was considerably more expensive.
Right.
But then with all of the development in solar over the last decade or so, the price of everything has come down greatly. And I think we're kind of at the bottom now. It's the changes are not, you're not seeing prices come down anymore, but it comes down to about $3 a watt, a little less than that. So the average home system is probably like a 3 or 4 kilowatt system. So that's a $9,000 to $12,000 cost before you get your rebate from the federal government.
Wow.
The federal government provides I believe it's $1 per kilowatt, $1 per watt. So a 3 kilowatt system would be a $3,000 incentive.
Right.
So if it's $3 per watt and you get $1 back, you get about a third of that cost back.
So if it's
from the federal
9,000,
government.
you'd
You
be
get
paying
about
$6,000.
$3,000.
Yeah.
And then
That's not bad.
how will the system work? People will start like me. So we still get a Fortis bill. At what point do they sort of reconcile or look at the power that we've given back to the grid? Or
Yeah, as soon as Fortis recognizes your account has been altered, they have to kind of flip the switch on the account and make sure that your meter is set up for net metering. You'll see it on your next bill as soon as that happens. Yeah, and they have amount produced and the amount consumed, and then they do the calendar reconciliation. I believe it's at the end of the year that they
that's
do
what we were
reconciliation.
thinking.
And that'll show up on your bill, or if you download your online statement, you'll see that.
It's so neat. So really, you put that cost in on an average place, now with the government grants, $6,000 in investment initially, maybe a little bit more than that, and 10 years to sort of start to see that coming back.
Yeah,
Roughly.
Yeah, exactly. And presumably the price of electricity is only increasing.
Yes.
So that's going to...
I would agree.
And the systems they last an extremely long time. The solar modules, the solar panels, they have a warranty where they degrade about, I think it's 0.8% per year. So that means after a 20-year period, or 25-year period, they'll still provide at least 80% of the original power.
Oh, that's a great
so
question.
So they do go down a bit. They do definitely lose their their ability to produce electricity, but at a very low rate. So 25 years from now, your system will still be at 80% of its original value.
That's amazing. I mean, you look at things like a roof. A roof lasts 20 years or what have you. So
Yeah.
it's outlasting that by a long
Well,
shot.
and we're not talking about $100,000 investment.
No.
You know, it's 10,000 or 15,000 or 8,000.
Yeah,
It
and
will
if you- there's-
likely go down in time too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting because, you know, I know from our point of view, having it over the last few months, we have a hot tub, I have a plug-in car, we have electric scooters. It alleviates some of your guilt, or, you know, there is an element of feeling a little environmentally friendly, or, you know, an acknowledgement that we're sort of harnessing some of the power of the sun and doing our bit. It feels good.
No, and
Well,
I
exactly.
agree.
And the future towards a low carbon future is it's clear every day as you watch the news that
Oh, yeah.
We need
reducing
that.
fossil fuel use is the way we're going to fight climate change. Everyone agrees on that. So electrification is the buzzword of the day, where everything's becoming electric. So where you used to have a gas stove, now you have an induction range. You used to have a gas car, now you have an electric car. So as our demand for electricity increases, there's a need for us to produce our own power as well. In my mind, I think it's good. Like you said, it feels good to produce your own electricity, and it feels like you are contributing because you're not burning fossil fuels and you're producing your own power.
Yeah. Well, as you say, all you have to do is watch the news and think, I mean, even we're loving it, but today look how gorgeous and sunny it is. We're in short sleeves and people are still out on the lake water skiing yesterday. And
Yeah, so I think what's going to happen now with solar panels is you're going to see, and it's already started with different ways of integrating solar into different building materials. So Tesla's
interesting.
created rooftop tiles, so you can have a solar roof. So I don't think it's going to be too long before all our roofs, or a bunch of roofs, will be actual solar panels themselves. You can buy these in the States now, and they're building them out, and they haven't developed them in Canada.
Amazing.
Your roof panels are actual solar panels.
your roofing material.
Your roofing material
will
has a
have
built-in
solar.
panel. You plug them all in, and then you have a natural solar array. So
That's amazing.
And you're starting to see all different types of solar films that are being integrated into building panels and that sort of thing. So eventually you'll see solar panels all over the place.
Well, and it makes sense too. I mean, even in the building that we're in right now, it wouldn't necessarily have to be the roof because we're so high. So couldn't you have solar to some degree on the sides of the building in some materials or something?
You
to
could.
capture
The challenge
some of
is
that?
trying to make it aesthetically pleasing. That's always been
Right.
a challenge with solar panels on roofs.
Yes.
Is a lot of people look at them and say, it doesn't look very nice if they're kind of
If they're on the side.
So trying to design the patterns so they look like they fit into the architecture. A flat roof is pretty easy because
Yes.
it kind of naturally it suits a flat roof.
Yeah.
When you get into sloped roofs, we try to really make sure we have everything symmetrical and not just kind of a hodgepodge of panels.
Right.
So
But you travel to other places. You know, you're talking about California and some of the places that I've been to where you're seeing a lot of solar. And I think at first, I mean, anytime there's something new that's different, you think, oh, that looks weird. And now you look and go, wow, that's really cool. That entire neighborhood is solar. And
And it's a positive, you know. It's,
yeah, I think
it's-
so.
Yeah. But you're right. It's getting used to it. It's getting used to seeing that. And people eventually will just get used to it. So
yeah, it's like windmills, right? You drive the Coca. I love seeing windmills. Some
Me
people
too.
think they're terrible looking. I think they look like progress.
Well, it
Yeah,
is.
it's true.
I
It's
like
progress.
that. They
I
look
love
like
that.
progress. Yeah.
yeah, that's so neat. So what would you say right now, just quick question, in Kelowna, what is the solar use? Are many people looking at it, people engaging and talking about it now with this government grant?
It's still very, very low.
Yeah.
Very, very little solar in Kelowna. It's although it's ramped up over the last few years. I've definitely seen more rooftop installations, which is great. I'd love to see everybody put solar on. But if you look at most new construction, it's not in the mainstream. So
No.
I think it's going to change, though. I think as utility rates increase, as natural gas prices inevitably increase through the carbon tax and just people realize that everything's getting more expensive. It's a bit of an easy way to kind of future-proof your home. So I think you're going to see a rapid increase in solar adoption.
And something that I'm hearing about, I know some of the new developments out in Lakestone, you're hearing it,
Yes.
and McKinley, and some of these new communities. A catchphrase that we're seeing is it's solar ready. What does that mean? What do you do to get your house ready for solar?
Yeah, so solar ready is usually referring to new construction, right?
Right.
So solar ready in a new house would be having a conduit from your attic, if it's a typical pitched roof, down to your electrical panel or down to your mechanical room where you might have your electrical panel, so that
Right.
you can fish a wire down and install a solar system. Because essentially you need to get from your solar panels back to your electrical panel.
Right.
That's where it is.
It
It's
wires
inside the
your
house. It's
panels,
not
wires
outside at the
straight into-
meter. It's
yeah.
inside to
It
your
wires
electrical.
right into your electrical panel, just like you'd have your dryer and your furnace.
Right.
You have your solar panels that go into that. They go through a microinverter that converts the electricity from DC to AC. That's the technical side of how solar converts solar power to AC, which is what your house runs on. So solar ready refers to having that conduit in place. In some instances, to me, solar ready would be the wire is already installed. Have a wire from your panel up at the roof,
Right.
just
Ready to go, waiting for the
ready to
panel.
go.
And I wonder if we will start to see that. I mean,
Well, and that probably makes sense because it's probably a lot less expensive to do it at the beginning than do it afterwards.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges with retrofitting a home with solar is getting from the panel to the roof or to wherever your solar
so
modules
that will
are.
have an impact on the
So
cost.
it would definitely it would have a positive impact, bring the cost down if you rough it in at the time of installation for sure. So solar ready house, as long as they put the right size conduit in, we've seen that doesn't always happen. But assuming they put in the right conduit, even if it's just the conduit that allows you to get the water or the wire from your panel to the attic, then from there to get from the attic to the roof is very straightforward.
It's so interesting because, I reflect back on me saying, would someone pay more? Would I pay more for a house with solar? Yes, because we do it and we see it. Would you pay $10,000 more, Shannon?
Yeah, I probably would because it's that feel good situation as looking back and going, okay, you're doing your part.
Well, and I
And
think
you're
once your
jumping
bill
ahead.
goes from $300 every 2 months down to
Well, then you'll see the
40.
benefits of it. But even apart from that, I still think that it's worth doing. I mean, we have to all do something, right? So, yeah.
interesting. It'll be really interesting to see. We'll have you back in a year, Stuart, and we'll
Yeah,
do this
and we'll
again
talk about it again.
Absolutely, that'd
and
be
report
great.
back to how many homes. I'm trying to think how many homes that we've sold this year have had solar.
Not many.
No, I think actually one. If I
Yes.
think about it, I can only think of one out of 290 houses so far.
No,
so,
two. I can think of two.
Okay.
Well, we'll check back in next year because I think that number is going to increase steadily.
I hope so.
Well, and how long has the grant been out at for?
I think it's been about a year,
Okay.
a little less than a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it takes time for people to realize that and the communication of that to go out. So
That's why we have Stuart here today.
we're going to
share
get a bunch of people calling you and being like, okay, we're ready.
the power of solar energy and harnessing the light that we've got here in the Okanagan. So if you have any questions at all, we're going to link Stuart to, we'll show your website and how people can get a hold of you. But what is the website, just for those who are listening and trying to remember it?
geotility.ca.
Perfect.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. That was amazing. We will have you back.